All right, everyone. So we have our x-axis, our y-axis SAFMED cards. So let's move on to the data points. Data points are going to be spots that you put on the graph to signify each instance that you measure your behavior of interest. Ours is going to be a measurement of how many SAFMED cards that we got correct or incorrect. The key to your data points is going to be located somewhere on the graph. Our key is off to the right over here, and typically it is off to the side of the graph, or it's under the x-axis. So for our purposes, our data paths, we're going to have two. We're going to have one that we're going to signify our data points using a triangle, and these are going to be number of correct SAFMEDs and then we are also going to have, we'll use the same color, we're going to have a circle. The circle is going to be incorrect SAFMEDs. Okay. All right, and this should have a title, key, all right, so let's create a SAFMED card. I feel like we're going to be saying that a lot throughout this training, so we might as well get used to it and have fun with it. Kind of like, do you want to take a selfie? Do you want to make a SAFMED? Yeah, I know that was bad. Anyways, so let's create another SAFMED card for graph key. Graph key is going to be our term. And then our definition provides information regarding data points and the behavior of interest being measured. Okay, so again, provides information regarding data points and the behavior of interest being measured. Add it to our pile. Wonderful. All right, so data points must be plotted correctly to indicate the level of behavior that occurred at each particular time period. The information on the level of behavior and the time period being documented is taken from the data sheet or other behavior recording instruments. Sometimes the frequency taken from the data sheet or other instrument needs to be summarized or added together before a data point can be entered on the graph. For example, if disruptions were being measured during a 45-minute class, the total disruptions that occurred would be added and divided by 45 to obtain a number of disruptions per minute. For this reason, it is important that the total observation time is noted so that these calculations can be made. Once the data point has been calculated, if necessary, each data point is connected to the next point by a line, and hence we'll get our line graph. If this didn't have lines connecting each data point, then it would be what we call a scatter plot. Okay? And we'll go into the variation in our lines and discuss trend lines and level once we've completed talking about our essential components here. All right, so that's our data points. Now, let's talk a bit about phase lines. So, I already drew in one phase line on here, but I'm going to draw it again in orange. So a phase line occurs each time there is a change that may have an impact on a behavior. A vertical line is drawn on the graph. This phase change line can denote the move from baseline, where there's no modifications in the environment, there has been no intervention in place yet, just naturally what the current level or frequency of behavior is, to intervention, or from one intervention to the other. Data points are not connected across phase change lines. In addition, phase change lines can be used to note other changes that may impact the behavior. This might be something like a change in a living situation, maybe a medication change, if the child was maybe out of school for a period of time. If these changes are temporary, then arrows are often used to mark the beginning and end of these temporary factors rather than phase change lines. So for our graph, we're going to take an initial baseline measure, and then we're going to draw a vertical line down for our phase change line. Now every time you have a phase change, there's also going to be a phase label, so that you understand exactly what that chunk in your graph represents, or what phase of your graph that is. So our first phase is going to be our baseline phase, right? Prior to implementing an intervention. So over here, I'm going to write baseline. BSL for short. And then over here on this side, I'm going to write study. Intervention. Okay. So that brings us to our ability to create two more SAFMED cards. Our first SAFMED card is going to be phase line. Go ahead and write that as a term, phase line. And then on the back, we can provide a brief definition. A line drawn on a graph to denote a change that may have an impact on the behavior of interest to be measured. Okay. Next, we're going to do a phase label. Go ahead and write that term. Phase label. Okay. And our phase label, a label that appears at the top of each phase to describe the particular phase. Or treatment. Okay, so in some graphs, you might have multiple phases, especially if you were doing some sort of reversal design or a multiple intervention design, where maybe you're implementing one treatment, you're seeing if there's an increase or decrease in behavior, you're withdrawing the treatment again back to an original baseline, and then maybe you implement a different kind of treatment to see if there's a further increase or decrease. So then you would have obviously different phases, and then you would have different phase labels like treatment A, baseline, treatment B, baseline, treatment A, baseline, treatment B, baseline, okay? So it's very important that you have that information on your graph. All right, so that about sums up all of the important components of our graph. The one thing that we didn't put on here is a graph title. That would typically be at the top and briefly describe the information that is visually being represented within that graph. Ours might be something like intervention of SAF-Med studying, or effects of SAF-Meds on acquisition of terms. All right, so let's move forward a bit here. And we're going to talk a bit about things that you might see on the graph and how you can interpret graphic displays.